Today's parsha is Shmini, and it's taken from chapters 9 through 11 of the book of Leviticus. And there's actually a lot of heavy material in this portion, such as God executing Aaron's sons, and Moses instructing Aaron that he can't even mourn for them, that they have to be buried outside the camp, because they essentially desecrated the tabernacle. But that deserves a lot of its own commentary. I want to focus today on another major topic of this portion, which is kashrut, otherwise known as the kosher laws. Now, this is actually pretty controversial, especially within the Messianic movement. Should we keep kosher? If we should, how kosher? Now, the whole of chapter 11 essentially deals with the kashrut laws, but I'm just going to be addressing a few verses at the beginning here. Verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hooves with clefts through the hooves, and that chews the cud, such you may eat." For those of you who don't know, chewing your cud it's essentially regurgitating the food and redigesting it. It's pretty interesting. That's for the land animals. Skip me down to verse 9. These you may eat all that live in the water. Anything in water, whether in the seas or in the streams, that has fins and scales, these you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fins and scales, among all the swarming things of the water, and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. So those are addressing the water animals. And then skipping down to verse 13, the following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture. Now, I've created a short list of some of the non-kosher foods known as treif, that's a term. The land animals, these are explicitly stated in this portion. The camels, daemon, which are kind of like badgers, hyrax. The big ones, swine, pigs, hares, rabbits, sea shellfish, shrimp, lobster, catfish, eels, swordfish, and air, eagles, vultures, ostriches. Some of you may have eaten ostrich eggs, owls. And this by no means is an exhaustive list. There's a number of other things that are what are considered what we call treif, or non-kosher. Now, as I said, this is kind of a controversial topic, especially among the Messianic movement. Personally, I've been led to keep what is considered biblically kosher, not rabbinically kosher. What does that mean? Well, I want to give you a little bit of context, give you a little bit of flavor of what rabbinical tradition is in practice. When I was attending the University of Judaism out in Los Angeles, I was seriously considering a conversion to rabbinical Judaism. Not as a believer, not Messianic Judaism, but to rabbinical Judaism. And while I was there were a number of my classmates, obviously the rabbis, and a lot of studying on how to do that. And I attempted to be what is called Shomer Shabbos. For those of you who don't know that term, it technically means somebody who observes the Sabbath. But colloquially, it means somebody who really observes the Sabbath, who's really adherent to it. So that meant that I couldn't drive. I couldn't, at the time when I smoked cigarettes, I couldn't light my cigarettes. If I wanted to go from the dorm room to the cafeteria, couldn't carry keys, couldn't carry money. And I had to pre-tear my toilet paper before Shabbat started. Why, do you ask? Toilet paper. Things that are attached through glue, sewing, and even perforation cannot be unattached for a purpose on Shabbat. This would involve taking something in one form and carefully dividing it up into another for some use, thus creating something anew. Paper towels also fall into this category. How to approach it? Pre-tear toilet paper before Shabbat or use tissues. For paper towels, pre-tear what you might need or use paper napkins. Taken from aish.com. There are, trust me, a lot of other resources that I studied for this. Another resource, am I allowed to rip something on Shabbat? Tearing is allowed as long as you are not 1, tearing to an exact size or measurement, 2, tearing any words or letters, 3, creating a viable utensil through tearing. For example, tearing toilet paper. 4, tearing apart 2 attached items. That's taken from Chabad. I also couldn't take a hot shower. If I wanted to shower, I technically need to take a cold shower. Why? I'm going to read through this really quickly. Bathing on Shabbos. Initially, one was permitted to bathe in water that was heated before Shabbos. Then the bathhouse owners began to heat water on Shabbos to generate business, claiming that the water had been heated before Shabbos. In order to stop this practice, the sages prohibited bathing in hot water on Shabbos, but permitted entering a steam bath on Shabbos. However, people who did not listen to the sages began to take hot baths on Shabbos, claiming that they had only used steam baths. In those days, both activities were performed in a commercial bathhouse. To enforce this ruling, the sages then prohibited entering a steam bath as well, but permitted bathing in natural hot springs. When some people continued to violate the instructions of the sages by bathing in hot water and claiming that they had used water from hot springs, the sages then banned bathing in any hot water, even hot springs, but permitted bathing in cold water. After a while, the sages realized that this was an unbearable hardship and rescinded the ban against bathing in hot springs while retaining the prohibition against steam baths and bathing in hot water. Shabbos 48. Why do I say all this? The point is, to be fair, this specific ruling, in part, is taken from an exegesis of Exodus 35:3, which states, "You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath." Well, especially for centuries, in order to get hot water, you had to kindle fire. So there's some sense to this. But for the most part, what happens a lot of time with rabbinic tradition is that they not only go beyond the letter of the law, they even go beyond the spirit of the law. And so we see, coming back around to kashrut, they've also taken from Exodus and Deuteronomy a passage that is almost the same in all three portions, Exodus 23:19, 34:26, Deuteronomy 14:21. "The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." Now, I've put an asterisk there by a kid for two reasons. One, the kid referred to there is a young goat. It wasn't a child. Nobody was boiling children. Two, it was a young goat. It wasn't a cow. It wasn't beef. However, from this, we get a very common tradition among Rabbinical Judaism to not mix milk products and meat products. And again, this is more of a Rabbinical tradition. It's not necessarily a biblical prescription. So if one wants to keep rabbinically kosher, here are some of the treif, again, non-kosher foods. Can eat cheeseburgers, mixing dairy and meat. Beyond that, you have to prepare food that are dairy products on one cookware and another on set of cookware for meat products. Eating as well, your dishes, your cookware. Essentially, no products that don't have any type of certification with one of these labels. These are kosher labels, Orthodox Union, that has essentially been monitored by some rabbinic body to observe that it's been slaughtered properly, it doesn't have certain ingredients. That's different than more of a literal biblical kashrut. Some of the things in biblical kashrut that are listed are swine, pork, bacon, pepperoni, and gelatin. Somebody may be surprised. Gelatin, 99.9% of the time, is made with pork products. So that means marshmallows, yogurt, gummy candies, gummy bears, gel medicines. Put an asterisk near there as well, because you can purchase at a premium kosher marshmallows, which aren't made from pork gelatin. Kosher yogurt, if you look at the label, aren't made with gelatin. And also medicine. There's some debate within the rabbinic community as to whether or not gel medications are permitted, because the preservation of health and life overrides the kashrut rule of pork, because you're essentially sustaining the life. But even at that, some of you have seen Tylenol will either have a gel capsule or a powdered white capsule. The alternative would be to use the powdered white capsule. And very quickly, shellfish, shrimp, lobster, crab, oysters, squid, calamari. Before I was observing biblical kashrut, I loved me some calamari. Now, I say all this with one caveat, big caveat, the law of grace. If you follow me to the book of Matthew, chapter 15:11, some of you may know this verse. "It is not what enters into the mouth that defiles a man, but what proceeds out of the mouth. This defiles the man." Now, I say this because, as I said, it's controversial in the Messianic community. I myself and my family, we keep pretty strict biblical kashrut. If you keep kashrut or you think it's a high priority in your life, that's great. Is it important? Absolutely. But it shouldn't be something that we as Messianic believers judge or look down upon any other Messianic believer who doesn't. Keeping kashrut alone does not make you righteous. Righteousness is the cleansing of your sins through Messiah's blood, period. This is something I think we may do well to study more in the Messianic movement, but I don't think it's absolute in our lives. Where's Amy? Is Amy here? Amy leads the food ministry in the back there. I would much rather each and every one of us bring food to contribute to that, and I would much rather somebody have food to eat and be sustained, to hear the scriptures, to come to the Lord and to know the Lord, and to not be so overly legalistic that we don't bring something or we don't feed them something that may not be technically kosher.